Hey, this is Diavlog of Slate magazine. I'm here at Slate World headquarters. Rare occurrence because I've been on the road in various states in the last few weeks, and I'm talking to Dan Foster. Dan, introduce yourself.
Hi, Dave. Dan Foster, National Review Online. Been on the road a bit myself. I think we're all becoming well acquainted with Holiday Inn Expresses and Comfort Inns in these past few weeks. Looking forward to Wednesday.
I've actually been taking advantage of the weird hotels that just pop up on our company's version of Expedia, the corporate Expedia. And there's one hotel in Eau Claire that the Metropolis something that's a resort/water park made to look like every room looks like a New York apartment, but kind of like a sleazy Patrick Bateman apartment. And it was the same price as Holiday Inn Express, so that's definitely what I've decided to do for the rest of my life, is stay at odd hotels.
No, that's a good idea. I was in Chicago covering Rahm Emanuel last month, and I stayed in a hotel that was apparently haunted right on Michigan Avenue. And I don't know if that's why it was cheap or it was the weird chemical smell that permeated every single pore of every piece of carpeting in the entire place. But yeah, you can find some interesting ones. But I try and keep it safe because you know what you're getting with those with the Holiday Inn Expresses and the Comfort Inns and things like that. But yeah, so anyway, we've both been on the road a lot covering these midterms, and so sad to say there's less than 100 hours left.
Yeah, that's terrible.
It's all said and done. Yeah.
What do we got that's interesting? I want to hear about your coverage in Massachusetts, because I went there to cover Scott Brown. I haven't been back since. I have a few sources on the ground, I guess, who have informed me of things, but you were actually there. So how does it look in Barney Frank's race?
Yeah, I went to Massachusetts a couple weeks ago, and I don't think when I said this in the article I wrote, I don't think that Sean Gillette, who's running against Barney, is going to win, but I think it's going to be really, really close. And who knows, anything can happen. And I certainly think that although Congressman Frank says his internals have him up, somewhere between 19 and 20 points, it certainly his campaign's not acting that way, and it for lack of a better word, it doesn't feel that way on the ground. You drive through Newton, suburb of Boston, which is kind of Frank's ground zero. You drive through Newton to get to these candidate forums and these stops that they're making, and you see Gillette signs, almost as many as you see signs for Deval, Patrick. There weren't that many Barney signs. I don't know if that's not his MO or what, but. Yeah, so it certainly feels close.
Yeah. I think that's important. I've noticed the same thing, and I'll talk about that when we go on a race I've covered, but there's an old, I think it's a Chicago aphorism that signs don't vote, and definitely, in Massachusetts, I don't think I ever saw Martha Coakley sign. She somehow stumbled her way to 47%, and in New York 23, Doug Hoffman, I saw Doug Hoffman signs everywhere, probably like 6 Bill Owens signs, and he won. So, right. Democrats are, there's lots of reasons for this. Maybe a few of them have lawns and money, but for whatever reason, Obama was kind of a...
or they think it's tacky.
Well, and also, the electorate changes. Like, when your candidate, like Barack Obama, is winning a bunch of suburbs and independent voters and people with higher incomes, you're going to see a lot of that. And when you have a last-ditch effort to pull out, like, some poor union workers and some people in tenements, then you're not going to see as much. So, but definitely, this is a huge change from 2008, and it's tough to not notice. Yeah.
Right, and he told, and so at a rally that he had with a bunch of local Democratic politicos up in Newton, the tone was kind of manic. It was almost sort of, we have to win this, we've got to pull this out, and there was real worry. And the local state rep who was introducing Congressman Frank said something that about how this is the most formidable candidate Barney's ever faced, and I know we think Barney's tough and he can take care of himself, but he really needs our help. And Frank himself, who's known as being kind of a, arrogance, the unkind word, but certainly, confident in his intellectual abilities, has been a little bit more modest, certainly in the appearances I saw him make even at friendly rallies or at a local chamber of commerce where he spoke. He's been a little bit more modest, a little bit more apologetic and subtle and difference splitting about things like the stimulus and financial reform. He sort of realizes, I think, that he can't take this one for granted. And Gillette's an impressive guy. It's true. He's got Georgetown, Harvard, Penn. He's an ex-Marine. He's a smart guy. He's a straight talker. He's following the Scott Brown model of staying away from social issues, even though he appears to have all the right conservative views on social issues. He's been sticking with, spending. And you want to talk about bravery? I saw this guy tell a room full of Massachusetts seniors that he's going to raise their retirement age, means test benefits, and increase taxes on Social Security.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me because for a number of reasons. I mean, I've heard other Republicans who are in strong positions say things like that, and Democrats they're still fighting this election with half of their attention turned to how unfair it is, and half to actually fighting the election because they just can't believe that they've passed so many things, and that the opponents are so blatant about their challenge to the welfare state, which Republicans have not been for a while. I amused myself earlier this week by reading George Bush's 2000 and 2004 convention speeches, and he was promising to get more children on S-chip and to get more people in homes and things like that. It's just unfair to them that you can have a candidate like I guess actually some of these guys walked it back. I was going to say like Sharon Angle, but she keeps walking it back. But kind of like Angle, who has been blatant about how she thinks Social Security needs to go, and you can't beat them to death with it like any other year. But the thing about Massachusetts, like I have to go weird, a strange respect for Barney Frank. I have to admit, and I remember when I was at Reason, we were pursuing a profile of him. I don't think it got off the ground, or maybe I think people were pursuing after I left. And never got off the ground. He definitely is arrogant, but it just seems weird to me that a campaign can be run against him, successfully blaming him for the housing crisis. And maybe that's not what Belat's doing, but that seems to be the tone of a lot of stuff I've heard, is that the economy's terrible and the housing crisis happened, and this guy has never accepted responsibility for his role in it. It just seems not quite blaming Poland for World War II, but blaming, some Serbs for World War I. they were they played a part in this, but this guy really, this is the fall guy. We're gonna let Ben Bernanke keep his job, and we're gonna promote Tim Geithner, and we're gonna let basically every CEO who didn't get defenestrated already keep his job. This really, Barney? I mean, I'm just sputtering now, like some sort of Democratic voter. So just
no, but you're certainly right that there's plenty of blame to go around, and you throw a rock and you hit somebody who played a part in the 2007-2008 collapse. But Frank was in a unique position, and you can't take the Republic. I mean, it was George W. Bush ownership society, right? I mean, these policies, housing policy was not made by Barney Frank alone, but certainly he was a cheerleader for and a major architect of the policies that led to the housing bubble. I mean, and there are people here who are far more qualified to talk about this than I am. But I don't necessarily think that Belat is hitting him for housing policy as much as just for being an unapologetic kind of liberal cheerleader right down the line. I mean, I saw this guy talk to the Chamber of Commerce and say, "I'm proud of my earmarks. Let me tell you all the highways and bridges and cranberry farming research that I got federal bucks for, and we need, a protectionist policy against China. That we need, they need us more than we need them. And I oppose all free trade agreements. And tick the box right down." Oh, and the funniest thing I heard him say, and nobody else seemed to think it was as funny as I did, was that he thought Obama's big mistake was downplaying the level of financial and economic trouble we were in when he came into office in an effort to be, quote, conciliatory with the Republicans. And I thought that, I got a big kick out of that. But I think that Belat, far from being negative, is just sort of letting Barney Frank get off on the wrong foot and check the boxes down this kind of standard, Massachusetts left liberal line that's been so successful for him in the past, and let Barney Frank forget that Scott Brown lost that congressional district by half a point or a point or something. So I think that Frank is caught a little bit flat-footed in the electoral climate, and there is this kind of dazed, stunned feel about his campaign. Like I said, I don't think he's going to lose, and I don't think he thinks he's going to lose. But he's a little, I think, weirded out that he has to run this up.
Well, this in some ways, this is my favorite thing about the election, is that there are a lot of old liberal lions who have never really had to defend their belief system. They're having to defend it now. The problem I have is just I'm an observer of these things and have some sort of worthless political science degree, and I kind of wish it was going both ways, because I don't think it's useful to have the reasons for the economic crisis and the reasons for the recovery completely understood as the failures of liberalism. Because liberalism failed, and that plays a part. But so did rampant capitalism. Let's be honest about this. I mean, I don't think I'm sure Frank wanted more people to own homes. That's true. So did George Bush. He didn't invent the system of chopping up the worst mortgages. Basically almost fraudulently moving around the paperwork so that mortgages that people knew were bad were put in the top tranches. I mean, he didn't sell those to a bunch of people. He didn't pass the risk around. He didn't bet against. There are all these people who actually, almost maliciously, exploited the system to raise money from people who were being exploited. Whereas, what Frank had in mind was typical big government liberalism, but not end of the world economy crashing liberalism. Just just expanding people's access to homes, access to equity, which I think is generally an okay idea. And this is a problem. I mean, I'm so torn over this because, I think that obviously the Democrats deserve to lose the election. You shouldn't preside over 9.6% unemployment and survive. But this idea that since voters have the ability to punish the government, let's punish them. But it's clear there's just no way for people to understand or to effectively punish the businesses that are responsible for this. The one time they felt like they could was that stupid fury over AIG. Let's take their bonuses away. Otherwise, we've already moved on back into this almost 90s framework of thinking that the government's always kind of fumbling. The Fed, if you read David Broder, the Fed is actually incompetent, which is insane. And that business based on what they're doing, the government's not competent, except for the Fed. And that's not the way things work. I mean, we haven't really re-examined. I mean, that's kind of why I wouldn't mind Barney Frank surviving, is because we need a couple. I mean, I'd like Barney Frank to survive. I'd like Russ Feingold to survive. I could do with another 60 Democrats losing. But some of the smart guys who actually were right about things at stages of the process, they don't deserve to go down in the wave. I'll say that. That's my bias.
Well, I want to talk about Feingold because you covered that race, but I'll say two quick things. I think one, this is an old story now, but all you need to know about FinReg versus, say, healthcare is the way that the media decided to cover it. The coverage on healthcare was very much aligned on capitalist, socialist, left, right, big government, small government. We sort of felt like we understood the narrative there and what the sides were and what was at stake and what we were fighting for. With FinReg, I mean, I don't know any editorial board at any of sort of the magazines or websites in our cohort who had a clean opinion on that bill straight down the line. And I think these issues are complex enough and sort of laugh in the face of traditional left-right divides enough that it's hard for the media to get a narrative on what these policies. I mean, there were things in that bill that we liked. We weren't dead set against it editorially, and certainly there's a lot in it that's problematic that we think could have been done better. But I think you're right that because Democrats are in the majority, they're being asked to defend their worldview in a way that conservatives aren't. But that brings me to my next point, which is that we've had some members of the House GOP leadership in our offices. We've had some former members of the House GOP leadership. All these folks will remain nameless for these purposes. But the thing that we were all kind of excited about, and I'll admit it, is that the conventional wisdom is always you can't beat Democrats with goodies, because Democrats will always have more goodies for voters than Republicans will. And you saw, and compassionate conservatism and sort of Karl Rove, George Bush style Republicanism was I would say, and many of us on the right would say, misguided attempt to beat Democrats with goodies. And what's exciting to conservatives about 2010 is that you don't need to promise goodies to win. I think that people finally get that there's the government that you want in a perfect world, and then there's the government you can pay for. And the two aren't the same, and so I don't necessarily think that, rather than thinking, oh, shouldn't conservatives be defending rampant capitalism, I think it's sort of exciting that we're in a position electorally where we can actually come out and say, no, we're for cutting all of this spending, we're for shrinking the size of government, and not be outflanked by, oh, but we're going to give you a free T-shirt.
Well,
which is the sort of, free T-shirts is the sort of, long-standing liberal, mode of governance. So
Except
I like that.
that Republicans are also promising to hold a vote on restoring that $500 billion to Medicare as soon as the election's over. So
no, that's true.
There's
No,
that
of course.
exception there.
But
not earmarks, not projects. That is important. That is a big difference. And I think I like that about this election. Again, I just think maybe what I'm frustrated with in the Frank race is that there's a lot. We like rage in politics generally. It's exciting to write about, and it changes things quickly. But it doesn't. I feel like we've politics are less interesting to me than what the first principles of the ideologies and the parties are. And what is the principle on housing? Is it that more people should own houses? Is it that it should be easier to own a house? Is it the government should help you if you want to own a home? And then it seems like we got away from that, and we immediately, starting with Rick Santelli. Not immediately, but, a few months after the recession, a lot of anger was directed at the fact that lots of poor people had houses they couldn't afford. I don't find that very useful. I mean, if the concept is that the government should never ever be involved in helping you buy a home, well then argue on that concept. But that's not that doesn't seem like it hasn't really been the case. Well, it hasn't been the case during this crisis. I mean, there have been tax credits increased for raising homes. There have long been tax credits for buying homes. I mean, and that seems like a more useful discussion to have than just saying poor people shouldn't have bought so many houses. Like, do you think people should be able to afford houses? Do you think they should have to buy only with what they can afford ever? They shouldn't be able to take. There just seem to be discussions that maybe they'll happen after the election, but probably not. And like some Democrats had started this in 2008. They just blamed Bush for everything. I didn't acknowledge that.
Right, and like you said, it's a confluence of factors with housing. I mean, it's fiscal policy, it's monetary policy. These loans couldn't have existed. Mm-hmm. These bad loans couldn't have existed without both a heavy emphasis on, Fannie and Freddie concentrating their considerable resources on expanding home ownership for the poor, and on and the kind of fiscal and monetary policy that we've had for the last. I mean, they were both necessary. I mean, but this isn't a clean left right. One of the areas where
that's what I mean. I mean, I keep saying party, but I don't really mean that. It's not clean left right. What do you think is important?
And I would say, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Krugman has written about this in the past. I don't know off the top of my head, but. I would say that home ownership is the wrong first principle to start with. Okay. I mean, affordable housing is one thing, and we can talk about federalism and whether states and municipalities are better at doing that. But I mean, what the heck's wrong with renting? I mean, certainly, I
rent for a while.
Yeah, and most of the people I know do too. Mm-hmm. But I do think Krugman has written in favor of an emphasis on affordable rents as opposed to affordable mortgages. So again, that's not a clean left-right thing.
Yeah.
But on to transition here on Frank, I'll come out and admit. I mean, I think Barney Frank's a character. I met him in high school when I was sort of tooling around the Capitol as on one of those silly youth in politics programs one summer. And I think he's a character. I think he's an interesting guy. I think he's a smart guy. And I thank him because he talked to me for half an hour without even asking me who I worked for. So I appreciated that.
Was this?
When I was up covering the race.
Oh, this trip. Okay.
Yeah,
I guess I would figure maybe he asked, "Are you from the Washington Times?" No. Okay.
right.
With other media, yeah.
No, he doesn't. He didn't ask me who I worked for, and he gave me very candid answers, and I appreciated that. And then I told him, But so I didn't have any problems. Like it sounds like maybe you did at Reason getting access to him or the folks around him. But so he's a guy. I respect. I disagree with him on almost everything, but he's certainly an intellect I respect. So let's switch to another liberal intellect who I respect, and I think a lot of conservatives respect, but disagree with, Feingold. You went up to Wisconsin.
Yeah, I was in Wisconsin. I guess on my last pre-election trip. I'm gonna spend election day in Nevada. Wisconsin was the last place I wanted to go because to be honest, I went there kind of expecting to see Russ Feingold flailing in his possible final campaign in an interesting way, and that's what I found because the problem with Democrats face in a lot of areas is that they have incumbents that are entrenched that they vote for, but they're not passionate. I mean, passion's hard to make up out of thin air, and the problem in Nevada, where I think Harry Reid's probably going to lose, is that people will vote for Harry Reid because they don't like Sharon Angle, not because they like him. The Wisconsin people love Russ Feingold. I mean, his favorables for somebody who's likely to lose are still pretty high, but Democrats just adore him. I mean, multiple people who were volunteering were like weeping as I talked to them.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because I read your piece, and I almost can't believe the numbers. And I mean, I've read about that race a few times over the last few months, and I sort of get the idea that you can't understand what's going on there unless you're on the ground. Because I thought if you had asked me 6-8 months ago to list them, even if this is a GOP wave election, to list them rock solid, safe Democratic seats, certainly Russ Feingold has got to be on the top of that list. So I almost find myself in disbelief that he's that far underwater. I could maybe even buy a dead heat, Harry Reid Angle situation, but spell it out for us. I mean, why is he in so much trouble?
Well, I'll say why he's in trouble, and I'll say why Democrats don't think it's fair. Those are the two things I was examining. He's in trouble because Wisconsin is one of these states that has been economically distressed by outsourcing for a long time, for basically 20 years. It's one of the states that voted for the caucus and hasn't voted for Republicans since then. And in large part, it's heavily unionized, and unions and a lot of our people blame the Chinese and back then the Japanese, Chinese, Mexicans, etc., for taking their jobs away. It got hit by this recession too, and that Wisconsin has generally a populist politics that is pretty mobile. Some historians of populism don't like the fact that their word can be used to apply to conservatives too, because then they think, well, it just means anger, and that's the case. But I guess in Wisconsin, it often means anger. That their tradition is of passionate or extremely busy politicians who try both things. Tommy Thompson doesn't seem very passionate, but he was the most innovative governor of the 90s, for example. And this economic angst was with the Democrats for a very long time. This year, things are worse, especially in eastern Wisconsin, which is Democrats basically, they win the state by winning all these smallish communities in western Wisconsin, but really ramping it up in Madison, Milwaukee, areas around there, and then surviving in the suburbs around the more conservative cities. They've just completely melted down out there. It's really what comes down there bring them down, and Republicans have successfully, the election hasn't happened yet, but pretty successfully blamed the economy on Democrats and convinced voters that not only did Democrats fail, but they made things worse. They made things worse because we have more debt to pay, and that's very resonant with people, with Wisconsinites. I mean, I've been talking about outsourcing. Something we don't mention much in coverage of politics because it's really thorny is that definitely in places like that, people are very emotional about the idea of America being overtaken by another country, and I just think debt is extremely resonant in places like, actually, Mark Kirk's been using it for 2 years in Illinois, saying that China owns too much of our debt. It's resonant in Michigan. If you watch campaigns there when Democrats are doing better, it's because they were beating the hell out of Republicans on China. Resonant in Wisconsin. So I think just all this economic angst that has Democrats been able to say for a long time, look, just put us in charge and we'll take care of it. Because Clinton signed NAFTA, but things were better for the state generally in the 90s. Just all moved over Republicans. There's no way for Democrats to dig out from under it. And I'm talking for a while, but the reason Democrats don't think this is fair is One reason, which I think is fairly silly, which is what an amazing number of voters are saying, which is it's all these foreign corporations buying ads with Citizens United, or big American corporations that outsource buying ads with thanks to Citizens United. And that seems like what every losing campaign says. There are just too many negative ads against me. And it's not even that true in Wisconsin because, yes, Ron Johnson, the candidate running against Feingold, has lots and lots of money. And other groups have gone in. And, yes, the DSCC has not gone in the state because Feingold didn't want them to. But he actually has been... I saw his ads all over the place. I saw his signs all over the place. He clearly has enough to run a campaign. I mean, you can't be unless you're really lazy, you can't be a 3-term incumbent senator and not have a ton of fundraising networks. Especially, he's run very tough campaigns and he has lots of money from those. And the other thing I think is unfair is that they really believe that the economy would be massively worse if they hadn't done what they've done. Feingold, the reason I'm surprised he's doing so poorly is because some Democrats say we had to vote for the bailout to save it. He didn't even vote for the bailout.
Right.
His argument is just that, he stood up against the banks and then voted for all this spending and all these healthcare reforms that are helping normal people. And, he'll run down the litany of the water treatment facility, the senior center, and the bridges that he paid for. And it just seems completely unfair to them that voters won't give them credit for that. They really, and the other thing they view it as, they really do view it as kind of transactional in some way. Like, we gave you bridges, you are working, how can you possibly not be voting for us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that has this insidious, anonymous third-party foreign tainted Chinese communist money, are they even targeting Feingold? And I think that's just it really surprises me the level of dissimulation in the suggestion when there's an overall third-party money advantage, spending advantage for Democrats, overall third-party spending advantage for Democrats when you take into account the big public sector unions and the SEIU. It just really strikes me as disingenuous, this charge. But you hear it over and over again. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's getting any traction or getting any results. But you still hear everyone from President Obama to Nancy Pelosi talking about this terrifying anonymous third-party money.
Well, the way that Feingold put it in one of the appearances I saw was, Ron Johnson. We're getting momentum on Ron Johnson by talking about outsourcing, and he's got. I'm paraphrasing Feingold now. Those ads he has that show all these empty factories. Those are because of the policies he supports, and they're trying to say. The reason you should care about these Citizens United ads is it's the moneyed interests who ruin the economy. It's trying to sneak back in the door, and it really, I mean, it's especially fitting coming from Feingold because Feingold rose to national prominence. I guess in two ways, he rose to national prominence the same way. It was I hate the way campaign finances work, and I will not take support from PACs, and I will reform it. Which was always a kind of good government issue that appealed to liberals and was kind of populist, but not that important. And the same thing here. Like, this is whether corporations have to, I'm trying to remember the phrasing of Citizens United. I mean, their point was that it doesn't corrupt the system to have these people buy ads because, voters are shareholders and they can understand where the stuff is coming from. This argument that democracy is ruined because a company bought an ad as oil, as Citizens for Freedom instead of oil company X. Right. I don't think that's very
Americans for America.
Americans for America. I don't think that's super compelling, but that's what Wisconsin liberals are obsessed with. I mean, really, everyone I talked to who was supporting Feingold, that was the first thing they went to. That's the reason he's losing is because of secret foreign money, and it's totally unfair.
We have to ask ourselves, as people who cover this stuff, the counterfactual. If Citizens United never happened, there's no Republican wave. The Republicans don't take over the House. I don't buy it. I think dollar for dollar, the unions are always going to be there. for the Democrats, and they have very, very deep pockets. And you have the political directors at the SEIU bragging about being the big dog, and we're the biggest spender in this race.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like the Democrats are wanting for money. I mean, if anything, the thing that I think gets underreported that's interesting about this, and we heard about it in 2009, and not so big a story this year, is the flight of Wall Street from the Democrats, towards the Republicans. But even that, I don't think is a decisive factor, because again, if you look at the bottom lines on both sides, it's not like Democrats are getting out.
No, I think
either in individual races or overall.
Both Politico and New York Times pointed out that they are spending as much as they expected to, and the reason Bob Perry donates $7 million or whatever is because part of that is because Andy Stern and Richard Trumka, go to the Huffington Post and say, we're going to kick your ass. we're going to spend more money than's ever been spent on this before. I guess I'm where Mike Pence is on campaign financing. I really think people should be allowed to spend whatever they want, and it should be totally disclosed. And I realize that when Mike Pence says this, it's probably because it's an answer that appeals to journalists. To me, like that that's never going to happen.
Right.
Because we've got like a nice Supreme Court precedent I guess take it back. Citizens United leaves the room for more disclosure, but there's precedent, more precedent against disclosure than there is for other aspects of campaign finance reform. Because should people be allowed to spend money? Allowed to spend money with and not worry about being hassled for what they're doing. I think that's where it comes from. If that was, and that's what a lot of liberals say is the case. It's just that they're losing the election now, so they're complaining about it.
Yeah, I mean, also disclosure. I mean, I think disclosure is a fine idea, and transparency is a fine idea too. And I'm just as skeptical that it'll ever come not attached to all sorts of other undesirable things like you see in the Disclose Act. I mean, you're right. I think that's an issue that both sides can kind of probably work out some middle ground on, but there's just not the political will. There's not the sort of. I think both sides are happy about the fundraising, bonanza that's coming from.
Yeah. Democrats have raised more money, I think, for the party committees. There's one exception recently. Republicans have been doing better the last quarter on the House side. Mm-hmm. But DNC's raised more money, and the SCC has raised more money, and their unions are spending a lot of money. And also the unions, I think they'll lose a lot of stuff, but they're going to keep some stuff because of the union ground game, which is better than the Republican ground game. So,
I mean, that's a good way to transition to kind of overall midterm predictions, because that's I've been saying my completely unscientific hunch. Gathered by osmosis of being around, smarter political prognosticators than I, is that the conventional wisdom of 50 to 55, net House seats for Republicans seems a little low, and that 8 or 9 in the Senate seems a little high. But the counter, so if you put a gun to my head, there is an office pool here at National Review, and
there's stuff at Slate too. And you want to.
Yeah, so I did. I went plus 60 in the House and plus 7 in the Senate. I think that the sort of leftmost race that we could plausibly win, and I put this to the left of Nevada, is Washington. I think that Dino Rossi might pull it out in Washington, but obviously California is not going to happen. Maybe I'll look like an idiot on Wednesday.
I was in California, but I was in Berkeley and San Francisco, which are weird because, again, if you drove through them, you would think Democrats will never win anything there because nobody puts up signs for Democrats.
There's no overt enthusiasm.
Well, it's culturally different. So I'd love some political scientist to write a thing about to spend 5 years researching political science for a paper that only I will read. San Francisco, everyone's wealthy and everyone's Democratic, and they all know it, and there's a lot of snobbery, so they just don't, why would they be so gauche as to put a Barbara Boxer sign up?
That's what I said, they just think it's tacky, right? Although maybe they'll do it in some sort of sense of postmodern irony.
They've actually, there's a bunch of nudists who are going to arrange in Golden Gate Park to spell out the name Boxer, and that's how we'll know.
I would go and cover that. But so I think that, But then the counter argument, and it's gone away because, but the counter argument certainly a month ago was that things like the generic ballot in the House don't tell you the real story, and this wave could easily piddle out, and you could be looking more in the 40s than in the 50s or 60s because of individual House dynamics, and that's what I grabbed on the Democratic ground game and this huge last-minute effort to get out the vote. But do you share that sense that it's probably going to be low 60s? And that's what I went with, 61.
Yeah, I think. For as much media infrastructure as we have covering elections, I feel like people have been. I haven't certainly, but I'm one person. People haven't done enough parachuting into districts that didn't micro stuff that may or may not be competitive, but no one knows because we all have this list of guys who won Bush seats or crap like that. I mean,
so there's always going to be surprises. I think that's.
Well, and I think the White House campaigning for Tom Perriello, and I bet throughout the election, my original prediction was that Alan Grayson could pull it off, but forget that. He'll use that clip if he wins. I figured there'd be some Democrats who came in the wave who are really good at politics and really good at raising money and will figure out a way to survive, because there always are. There really always are. I mean, there were guys who survived '94 who you never would have thought would. But the guys who are going to go down are the very safe, fat, happy Democrats who never raise much money. And this is where Citizens United matters. Not Citizens United. This is where the big secret money matters. There's a district no one thought was on the map. Somebody decides to be entrepreneurial and spend $100,000 on ads, and all of a sudden that person has to compete. I've written a little bit about this for Slate. I covered some of Ron Kind in Wisconsin, who was elected in '96 and is totally people think is safe and is just a really good politician who keeps getting mentioned as running for Senate or governor at some point. Third-party groups spend $1 million against him, and all of a sudden he has a dogfight. So there's going to be a lot of places like that we didn't pay much attention to, where I think North Carolina might be a killing field, because if you looked at it all year, North Carolina is one of those places where the Democratic Party still dominates. It's really North Carolina, Arkansas, and West Virginia are the solid South. I know that West Virginia was not part of the Confederacy, but solid South. Everyone's a Democrat. Places where Democrats still win everything, and since February 2009, people have been very angry at the Democrats statewide. The governor's unpopular, and Kay Hagan's unpopular, and I just think there's a bunch of House people in the House there who won safe seats because it was gerrymandered for them, who could go down. There's in Arkansas, I think Democrats could lose two or they could get swept out. Tennessee, they could get almost swept out. But in the Midwest, I think Illinois, basically Democrats screwed themselves because they expanded very quickly from 2002 to 2008 because of Republican scandals. The economy was doing well there, and actually Rod Blagojevich was horrible person, but a pretty efficient governor in terms of signing popular progressive things and moving money around. So they won a bunch of stuff, and they're going to lose a bunch of stuff. I think they'll end up losing maybe 3 seats there. So I look over the map over the stuff we haven't been paying attention to, and I think it'll be could be 60.
Yeah. And what about in the Senate? Do you think Kirk will win in Illinois?
Well, the difference is I don't think it's the thing I just discussed. I don't think it's possible in a Senate race because Senate races there's a lot of national focus and a lot of media attention and a lot of money spent and people get defined. Whereas in a House race, there'll be somebody who's I'm angry. I don't know anything that, I'm going to vote for the senator I've seen 5,000 ads for, but I hate the Democrats right now, so I'll vote for whoever the hell this Republican is. It could be that knucklehead in Ohio who dressed like a Nazi, who knows? So I think there's going to be a lot of random losses in the House, but the Senate, pretty much, I think, what the polls suggest. Illinois, I feel like Kirk will win. I think he could win with 48% because there's a Green Party candidate. And that's a total own goal, because if Democrats nominated a different candidate, they'd be winning it. If Democrats were more enthusiastic, they'd be winning it. That's one of those states where they're going to lose this year, beat themselves up and then crush it in 2012. Like, Obama's obviously going to carry Illinois and sweep some of these guys back in, but the Senate seat is a 6-year thing. I think he'll pull it out. I feel like, I should have got the map in front of me. I feel like Republicans pick North Dakota, Indiana, Arkansas, Illinois, Wisconsin, Nevada. Unless I'm forgetting one, I think that's it.
So you think Nevada's a lock for sure?
I wasn't there, but I have colleagues who've been there, and there's just, you can't get reelected with 15% unemployment. He's the man who presided over the Senate with unemployment surging and house and foreclosures, and it doesn't matter whose fault it was; they're going to punish him. And
the thing that's convinced me is now polling is including the none of the above option. And Reed's never been able to get over 50, and sometimes he hasn't even been able to get close. And even the good sort of sophisticated polling with none of the above has angle ahead by a couple of points. So I would agree with that, and that leaves Chuck Schumer probably presiding over a much smaller Senate Democratic majority.
Well, this is why he really should want to pull out Illinois in Illinois, because I definitely, there are Democrats who think Durbin would be the best face of the Republican or the Democratic Party. They really like Durbin. They think Schumer would be. Well, I mean, I guess there's like a Matt Taibbi Democrat, which I just invented right now, who thinks the problem with the party is that they.
Octopus,
yeah,
right?
the octopus
That's the big
thing.
problem.
They became like the party of Goldman Sachs, and like nobody reinforces that like Schumer.
Chuck Schumer. That's amazed me. I mean, I remember, being from around the area. I remember when Chuck Schumer was, and Senator Clinton at the time were fighting tooth and nail to preserve the tax loophole that let hedge fund managers claim all of their income as capital gains. So you had these billionaires who were paying minuscule taxes on the huge fees that they collected, and nobody fought harder to keep those loopholes in place than Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton.
As he should. So, he's from New York, but that's the thing.
Of course, that's his fundraising base, his bread and butter. So I get that, and I also think that I talk about a guy like Feingold versus Schumer. I mean, I get really turned up. The more times I hear a politician say middle class, usually the angrier I am. I mean, I thought that liberals were supposed to be about helping poor folks, and I've never heard anyone say middle class more than Chuck Schumer. I mean, I think the sense among conservatives is the middle class is precisely who you should leave alone. They're doing fine, thank you very much. And so if I'm faced with a guy like Schumer and a guy like Feingold, at least Feingold's a known quantity. He's good on civil liberties stuff. He's a down the line liberal, but he's a liberal who believes in something. Schumer, I don't know what the heck is going on there, and I think that is interesting. I hadn't heard that there's a sense that Durbin might be the better choice. I would think that Schumer's been doing more maneuvering and has as many friends as Durbin does, and certainly he's the maybe this is regional bias, but certainly he's the New York Times favorite to take that.
Well, I also think there's a stupid reason that shouldn't matter, but Durbin is from Illinois, and the president's from Illinois, and I feel like it'll be pretty quick lockup for Schumer, but there are people who actually do reporting on this versus me, who's reading the reporting and then going like far away from D.C. So I don't know. Well, I guess I forgot. I mean, I think Republicans will gain Pennsylvania. I'm less sure about Colorado, but probably.
Yeah, that's going to be tough.
Because I was there, and Michael Bennett is actually like one of my favorite candidates of the cycle because he's never run for anything before. And his shtick, he really doesn't have a shtick. He really is just like a smart guy. I mean, his brother's the editor at The Atlantic. This smart, intellectual guy thrust into this like incredibly stupid government position. All he talks about on the ticket, he's credible talking about it. He's not like one of these guys who's like, I'm going to shake things up because I created a widget that's really good and I know business. He's like,
right.
His shtick is really, these people are morons. Like everyone I work with is an idiot. Send me back there because they're all idiots and I'm not. And they're Republicans. Having been there, I realize if Republicans win, if you think they're gonna, that's going to lead to anything but, just endless filibusters. And as they try to defeat Obama, you're an idiot. And like, he's got to a tie by saying that from being like 12 down. I think Sestak's a great candidate who'll be winning in a different year. I feel like Manchin will pull it out, and I feel like I was there. It's another place. I mean, I just feel like a generic Republican would win, maybe Shuttlemoor Capita would win, but John Racy's just a very hard carry. I mean, just it shouldn't matter. Again, there are things that shouldn't matter, but the fact that he lives in Florida, half of it, or sorry, I don't want to lie for him. The fact that he's like a lot of business connections in Florida, and his wife is registered to vote there, I think will like be the deciding factor, and that's idiotic, but I figure it work. And I'm one of these people who just doesn't think Dino Rossi can pull out watching him, but I might be surprised.
Yeah, that's what I say. I mean, that's the one that I think there could be a surprise there. I don't think California is going anywhere, and Colorado. I wish I was. I mean, I think a lot of the folks around here are think that Buck will win, but I'm not so sure. But so that leaves. I mean, that if I'm doing your math right, that leaves +8. Did I
see one? I was waffling on one of them because you didn't notice. Well, and then Alaska, I feel like Murkowski will win.
Really? Yeah. Well, that's an interesting.
I saw today that a talk radio host encouraged a bunch of people to just register as write-in votes to complicate it. So what will end up happening is that I think she'll win, and Miller will sue to try to get her votes disqualified. Wrong, and we haven't had a good test of that, but generally write-in. It's gonna look. That's actually one of my with the great stupid post-election stories. Let's say Murkowski wins by write-in vote. 1, it'll take a long time to count it. 2, it'll be embarrassing for Palin. 3, it'd be more embarrassing for Palin if her candidate lost and then sues to try to win anyway. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. But I mean, I figure like if a bunch of schmucks with similar names to Lisa Murkowski signed up on the last day, it's tough to make a legal argument that like the voter who spelled Murkowski with a Y instead of an I actually meant to vote for a schmuck who listened to a radio show the day before. So I was counting? I'm just talking a lot instead of actually answering you. It's like Wisconsin, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Nevada, North Dakota, Arkansas, Indiana. I guess that's 7. I feel like 7.
Well, okay, so we're in the same spot on that. I actually do think that Miller will pull it out. I mean, I just don't think that any of the polling can really. I mean, I know Murkowski's popular, so is her dad, but I don't think that any of the polling can really capture the experience of closing those curtains in the voting booth and then have, I mean, I think there's just a huge disadvantage that goes with being a write-in candidate, and she'll probably poll higher. She'll probably break the record in Alaska, whatever it was, 24% for a write-in, but I can't see her getting. I mean, so I guess what I would say is, I mean, what is she winning?
I think so. The problem
in that scenario,
polling is impossible in Alaska. But the concept they're finding is that Miller's image is just dreadful. He's just seen as extremely arrogant, and the bullying of the reporter was like a long story that they screwed up. And yeah, I think, did you meet him, or was it Robert Costa who came to the office when he came to the office?
Oh, it was Costa. Okay. I didn't meet him. Yeah.
He plays okay. He plays pretty well in person, but he definitely just has the arrogance of a guy who served in the army, went to like is a war hero, went to Yale, beat a senator, and is like, it's tough to like, it's tough to be genteel when you're fighting a weird 3-year race after that. Like, I mean, the thing that soured me on him is when he was in D.C., he just started tweeting about all the stuff he was picking out for his office. Just stuff like that. It's just apparently his negatives have surged from like nothing to the 60s.
Yeah, I saw that. I can't see. I mean, it'll be really interesting. We just don't have the precedence here, and I agree that it would be unfortunate for both Palin and Miller and the Republicans, considering that there's a third-party group launching a site called No More Frankens to raise money to fight recount efforts and to fight lawyering, post-elections. It would be unfortunate in that environment for something like that to happen in Alaska. But I guess we'll see. I mean, that'll be the one that'll be most interesting to watch, and it almost certainly won't be decided Tuesday.
Yeah,
Tuesday night or Wednesday.
Political always beats everyone to this stuff, and they pointed out, there could be Democrats could lose a bunch of jump balls, and the fate of the Senate depends on long recounts in Washington and Alaska, which would be a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think it'll really matter. No, it don't really matter. Actually, no. All that matters is that does Mitch McConnell get more than 41 votes? Yes. Okay. Because then he gets to filibuster everything.
Yeah, I think that I've been saying this for a while, and I know other people have too. I think that the worst outcome for the Democrats would have been, I think, a very, very razor-thin majority in the House. It doesn't look like that's going to happen anymore, and a razor-thin majority in the Senate. And that'll be interesting to watch after the elections, presuming that the Republicans do take over the House comfortably and really narrow the gap in the Senate, which is that you hear these reports that President Obama is going to immediately challenge Republicans on immigration reform, on the tax cuts, and on I forget if the third one was energy or not. But if he does that, I think it those are all political losers for him. There's no reason to think that immigration is going to do any better in this climate than it did in 2007, the last time they tried it. And I think that the Republicans have been winning the debate on the tax cuts. So if Obama does that, I think he's in a whole lot of trouble with the new Republican numbers. But if he lets the Republicans sort of lead the conversation and in Congress and sort of put their start out on offense, then things are much more unpredictable. I don't know how. Because people forget November 3rd. Mandates don't last that long. The political environment in 6 months is in many ways just unpredictable. We don't know what a Republican-controlled Congress is going to look like, what they're going to do, and I think that'll be much more interesting. But I think if Obama does what some of the reports suggest he's going to do and challenge Republicans on these issues, he's going to lose.
We don't know any of that, though. I'm not a White House reporter. Those guys work very hard, but that's a tough job because they're constantly getting spun with the wisdom of the moment that can change. So. Yeah. He's got a lot of people around him who survived the Clinton thing, and he's going to end up listening to them. He survived 95, 96. I think they're going to get a lot of stuff wrong because the difference was when Republicans came in, it was for a lot of reasons that didn't have anything to do with the economy. The taxes, a few other things, but the economy was basically pretty good. 5.6% unemployment. There are people who came in because the Democrats screwed with their guns in the Brady bill. There's just not. It's going to be a Republican majority that has a direct frontal assault to everything Democrats believe will help the economy, and there's not really a great way to handle that. If you honestly think, if your economic advisors honestly think that we need to keep spending money, and you've got Republicans who demand austerity and a balanced budget in 2011, which would be a balanced budget, I think would be like a 40% cut or something.
Yeah.
I don't know where I think what they might end up doing is letting Republicans put it out there, letting the media cover them as people who don't understand that their mandate is to create jobs. Because it really is. There's rejection of a couple of things Obama's done, but, do you think if unemployment was 5%, he'd be losing the House?
Losing not with 39. It's conceivable. It would certainly be much narrower. 39 seats. What's the historical norm? 24 seats.
Yeah, he'd be losing some seats, but Republicans will win because the economy's bad. So I think they're allies, the media, in judging whether the Republicans are running a serious economic agenda or whether they're trying to pander to the Tea Party.
That's why it's so interesting, because I think it is kind of a game of chicken. I think that whoever takes the lead into, because you're right, the Republicans' mandate is to create jobs, but certainly there are a lot of candidates who are, who are going to be elected. There's going to be a freshman class in the House, and there's going to be, one or two, maybe three libertarians, people you could fairly describe as, or at least, maybe you don't like that label, because you have an idiosyncratic view of what that means. But they're, Rand Paul and Miller and Engel are really are smaller government types than almost anyone else in the Senate Republican caucus, and so they're not going to come in and think that, they're not going to come in and say, well, we got to be pragmatic and create jobs. Come up. I mean, they have a program. They have, and they're going to make some interesting votes, and I think they're going to cause a lot of trouble for the establishment leadership. But it is interesting to see, because I think that there's a disadvantage to whoever moves first. I mean, I think that the natural inclination for both sides is going to be to play defense. So if those reports are true about Obama challenging the Republicans, that's not going to go over well. And at the same token, I think you're right that if the Republicans spend a lot of time and energy on things that aren't perceived or aren't covered by the media as being engines of job creation, then it's going to be really bad for them. So I think the emphasis is, all the incentives are going to be to let the other guy move first. So it should be a really interesting time.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the other thing that's going to happen is going to, there'll be a lot of guys who won that we never heard of before who are going to give interviews and say things that sound crazy.
Right.
So that's not going to change. I mean, basically, I think we're still going to have, the kind of think progress up in the post style of, oh my God, can you believe what that guy said?
Right.
Reporting will welcome the Republicans in. And I think Democrats will appreciate that, because the polls say that people are voting for Republicans, like independents especially, are voting for Republicans they think are complete idiots. I mean, I think it's something like, the number of people who think Christine O'Donnell could be a competent senator is less than is greater than smaller than the number of people who are going to vote for her. There are people who think the Republicans are complete fools but will vote for them. And Democrats know that. So, actually, to get to that, you were about to say something.
No, I was going to say, transition, speaking of complete idiots. What do you make about the pair of rallies that are about to descend on Washington tomorrow?
Oh, the Jon Stewart things. I guess I was an early skeptic of them because I noticed some liberal organizing friends, Democrats, saying this is going to be really bad for them. Mm-hmm. It was going to take people out
Get off
of
the boat,
GOTV and have them mess around on the mall. I mean, full disclosure, I guess my parents are coming down to go to it.
Yeah, so, I know. I'm shocked by the number of apolitical people I know who are going to hop in a car, get on the Acela, and go down there for this.
I think actually it'll be probably probably the first. I wonder how it'll work logistically, because I definitely think it ballooned bigger than people thought it would, and there are going to be a lot of liberals who just don't quite figure it. Well, but maybe it'll be better than, I don't know. I'll go back and forth. I don't know how well people from New York and New Jersey and whatever understand D.C. transportation and how bad it is when it's blocked off for a rally.
Yeah.
So, but I think it'll be pretty harmless.
Well, that's the sense I get. At best harmless.
At best harmless.
At best harmless, because I don't know. I mean, maybe you know better than I do. I don't know what these things are.
Well, I mean, I've seen what the schedule is going to be, and it actually looks a lot like the Glenn Beck rally, which, again, the coverage of that before it was running up was kind of silly, and whether it was he was defying member Martin Luther King, but it was just this huge tribute to America, and it'll be this will be the lefty version of the tribute to America. I mean, there's going to be. Stewart and Hilbert both speak. There's a lot of other entertainment. There's a reading by Sam Waterston, hopefully about robot insurance, which is still the best moment of his career. And there's going to be musical performances by the Roots and Sheryl Crow and Jeff Tweedy and Mavis Staples, unless they've added somebody else. And then there's Sanity Awards. I think it's Sanity and something else awards, or there's awards at the end of the show, which is, again, modeled directly after the Glenn Beck thing, where he offered the Faith, Hope, and Charity Awards to people. I mean, the Glenn Beck thing, I mean, I joked, 2 weeks after that happened, hey, does anyone remember a single line from that speech? And everyone was like, what do you mean, you hate America? No, I mean, this is a big thing, but that didn't really change history, did it? Can you remember anything he said? I was just joking. The only thing I remember Beck saying was, pick up your stick!
Well, I mean, that's okay. So that's the question. I mean, what gets done? What's accomplished by this? And I can't. Yeah. And this combined with, I'm a guy who's I'm a Colbert fan, just in terms of his talent. And I'm one of those guys who thinks that Colbert is a conservative pretending to be a liberal, pretending to be a conservative. But I, this whole thing, and we'll see how it goes off, and combined with Stewart's, I thought less than stellar performance with President Obama. I mean, he was in a tough spot, but less than stellar performance with President Obama this week just lends more and more little, beans on the pile to the idea that Stewart is probably past his best days as a cultural, political, social force in this country. I just don't see what the point of this thing is. I don't know, like you said, what's going to be different on Sunday. And I think he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. If he makes this an overt political rally, it'll be a lot less funny, number one, and it'll tick a lot more people off. And if he goes the Glenn Beck route and makes it just sort of broadly patriotic, then I don't get why it happened.
Well, but Beck wasn't broadly patriotic. It was all wraps of patriotism, and the Comedy Central people will, I'm assuming, wrap this in the kind of parody Colbert patriotism, where he, what's the opening sequence where he like jumps and plants a flag, and something. But the point of the Beck thing, what I loved about the Beck thing is that there actually was an ideological message that was, hey, I know everyone likes the welfare state and the current tax system, but we can't afford it anymore, so we need to read Robert Putnam and all start taking care of each other through our churches and charity, and get rid of Social Security and Medicare and things like that. I got that message basically. I was just talking to people during it and after it, and they're all like, "Yeah, I really realized that." Well, they didn't realize it there, but they're already thinking, I have Social Security, but I can't afford it. We just need to get rid of it. So, there was an ideological message there.
But it wasn't about how evil Democrats are. No. Need to vote Republican.
It wasn't partisan. It was civic.
It
was about what kind of country you want and what each people would give up for it. And the Stewart thing is, I find, I like Stewart okay. I like Colbert. Colbert especially, I think, is really, really funny. But the problem they've had is that Democrats won with a lot of enthusiasm, and they actually passed things that Democrats have wanted for a very long time. But they're not as, I guess, because the economy's not turned around, or for any reason. Bill Clinton was president doing things Democrats won. They still hated him. For no reason, they're not. It doesn't seem to be they're as clear on their vision of what the country should be. They know that they hate Republicans, but they're not quite as clear what this country should be like. Sometimes they'll ramble about single-payer health care. We should all have that. But doesn't seem very realistic. Whereas conservatives have survived Bush and part of Obama with this clear vision of what we need to get back to. Right. And I don't know if there's anything really more than making fun of the other side and how silly they are for Stewart. When he's gone big patriotic, like after 9/11, his show after 9/11 and other moments, it's just generic. This is a good country. We should all like each other. But not much more than that. And, I have no idea. I'd be amazed if it has a real political effect at all. It's too cynical to say Obama's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you saw the interview with Obama?
I did, yeah. The most interesting part, I think that people are talking about is the heck of a job Larry comment, and I agree with my colleague Jonah Goldberg that this was, even though President Obama tried to recover. So people don't know.
Yeah,
I'm sure there'll be a link to it on this blogging head. But basically, Stewart, I thought, sharply criticized Obama for saying that this is going to be an administration about change, and calling Obama for saying things like, well, you can't keep sending the same people to Washington and expect different results, and then hiring Larry Summers. And Obama was kind of, put on the defensive by this. He seemed to actually kind of testy about it and hurt by it, and in a very unfortunate choice of words, if it was anything, it was a Freudian slip. It certainly wasn't pun intended, as he later said. He said, Larry Summers did a heck of a job thinking through X, Y, and Z. And I thought that was interesting because, like Jonas said, it was like Obama laughing when that woman told him that she was tired of defending him because he was expecting something sort of in line with his own self-conception, and what he got was an actual challenge.
You know what this here reminds me sometimes of is, you ever listen to a commentary track on a DVD by a director of a really horrible movie? Like,
yes, I actually have.
Like Uwe Boll?
Not Boll, no, I won't subject myself to that, but sure.
But just, I think, the Obama presidency has been better than, say, House of the Dead. But if you listen to those commentary tracks, it's just full of rage at how no one really understood what they were trying to do.
I think that's really perceptive, yeah. I think that's dead on.
And, you see this shot, no one understood this shot. This was meant to convey the hero's angst at the loss of his woman to the zombie horde.
Well, this is an old AV Club feature, commentary tracks of the damned.
Yeah, I think that those would be possibly more useful than the last couple of Obama speeches.
Yeah, and there's the inevitable dash of attention. No, I think that's exactly right.
People don't care about the details if they know people who are getting fired. It's that simple.
Right. I thought that was very telling in the Obama interview. He said there are things we've done that a lot of folks don't know about. And Stewart said, "What have you done that we don't know? Are you throwing us a surprise party or something?" And he made a joke about it. But I think that's symptomatic of what's going wrong with the interaction between his communications and his policy. Is that he proceeded for 9 minutes or something to rattle off these accomplishments that were specifically tailored for the Daily Show audience. Oh, credit card companies. Oh, student loans. You can stay on your parents' health care. On and on and on. And I think that every time he does that, he's doing a disservice to himself because he's broadening this cognitive dissonance between here's all this money we spent and here's all these things we passed and here's all the items we've been spending all of our time and energy on. And guess what? Unemployment's still close to 10%. And guess what? The national debt is still ballooning. And so I think he's actually doing himself a disservice by cataloging these are all the things we've done, this is all the money we've spent, and yet, you're right, you don't feel that. You don't feel, America doesn't feel good.
Well, there's a second part to the argument which just might not ever be convincing to Americans, which is the Democratic promise is that when things are awful, there'll be a bigger safety net for you, and you can't get screwed over by credit card companies or by student loan managers or by healthcare companies. So this, there's a downturn, but we've created better programs for you to survive the downturn, and then you'll get back on your feet. And I guess the next part of that is, and then you'll get back on your feet, because it's hard. They don't seem to be describing this while pointing out that things are terrible. We're helping you through it. We'll all be stronger at the end of it. I mean, I guess maybe I'm just saying what Obama's saying. It's an impossible argument like that will make sense. Democrats. I think one Democrat was telling me yesterday. I was I mentioned I referred to healthcare as Obamacare on MSNBC. Mm-hmm. I often do that. This is most of my hate mail. Most of my hate mail is in an article. I've kind of tried to just go inside the head of somebody and explain what they're thinking. And somebody's like, "How should you say that?" I'm like, I remember I said, "Here's what Democrats think: the Feingold losing is cosmically unfair." And people were like, way to make a value judgment. I'm like, well, I kind of was, but you. But I guess my point is that they think it's unfair. Right. Same thing. I was like, look, Republicans call it Obamacare, and they're going to call it their vote against Obamacare, and all they're going to say Obamacare. But the Democrats pointing out, you know what? If everything goes through and we have more people have access to health care in 5 years when most is supposed to happen, then we'll be happily calling it Obamacare.
Right. I mean, I think we when we call it Obamacare, we do. It is a slur, but it's the direction of causation is off. It's not that we hope to color people's perception of the healthcare bill by attaching Obama's name to it. It's that we hope to color people's perceptions of Obama by attaching the healthcare bill to him. Yeah. By giving him ownership. So I have no problem with that. And I think
remember Reaganomics.
It's got descriptive. Exactly.
Reaganomics started as people insulting Reagan for running over a bad economy. Yeah. And the economy improved, so we refer to Reaganomics as great. So it was weird to me. Liberals assume that Obamacare is always going to be a horrible slur. Hey, you don't ever think we're going to get back to 5% unemployment and people are going to have better health care, and they'll be like, thank God Barack Obama was president. And they don't right now because they realize the only thing that matters is jobs, and they haven't created them.
Oh, we shall see. But but before we wrap it up, sure. I thought that there was one other great moment in the interview, which is where Stewart says, "Well, are you going?" And this speaks to what you were talking about this being an impossible argument for Democrats to make, and you would say impossible. I'd say it's like the Krugman argument that the stimulus should have been twice as big. Well, there's perfectly empirically untestable.
Also, should have unicorns. I mean,
right, exactly. And so when Obama makes kind of similar arguments about how things would have been much worse off, there was a moment where Stewart said, "Well, okay, so you ran on this lofty hope and change stuff, but it seems as though you've been governing in a different way. Is your next campaign going to be pure pragmatism?" And I'd actually quibble with his use of the word pragmatism, but he says, "Is it going to be yes, we can, given certain conditions?" And Obama says, and I think this is definitive Obama, he says, no, John, I would say, yes, we can, but, right? But it's not going to happen to me. So, I mean, and Stewart just started laughing because the whole idea was it yes, we can, or was it yes, we can, colored by all, conditions on the ground and empirical problems and intricate questions of policy and what's politically possible. And Obama can't seem to get outside that loop, and so he couldn't help but attach those buts. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, again, none of this. We can already, we've already seen polls that show people saying they like George Bush more than they thought at the time.
Right.
I mean, I can already imagine if the economy recovers, if Democrats are... I really do think, elections are fun to cover, but if Democrats have actually passed things that will be impossible to roll back, as I guess the cap crowd think they do, then it will look like, Obama used the political capital he had at this weird magic moment to create a much more European system of healthcare that now Americans are all love. And I still think such a thing is possible because remember in 1964,
that keeps me up at night.
Yeah, the reforms of LBJ's landslide survived and are so popular that Republicans are promising to fully fund them, even though Republicans won 1966 elections and LBJ not resigned but retired. I think he actually has effectively used power to make the country more. More socialist. Why not? I don't know if use that word.
Let's call a spade a spade. And I think that.
It just seems weird to view world historical events in the terms of whether Blanche Lincoln can survive. Who cares? I mean, what did they end up? Eisenhower retired. Who gives a damn? We're not going to remember who any of these people are. But obviously, that's not a thing you can tell Jon Stewart.
No, it rolls up into. That idea of the tactical stuff, the micro stuff, isn't really important on a world historical scale, but it does create the conditions for. To go back to what we started talking about, it does create the conditions for conservative small government types to run on a program that wouldn't have been politically possible a few years ago, and that could lead to some. I'm pessimistic about the chances for repeal. People around here don't like me saying that, and I really, really hope I'm wrong. But exactly right. So that's what's really going to matter, and this is going to be, this election is going to be talked about as a minor. The election itself is a minor diversion in the course of America in one direction or another, or just a piece of that puzzle. So I think you're right on that. What are you going for as Halloween? What are you going as for Halloween?
I was going to be a member of Insane Clown Posse, but it turns out that's the hipster costume of the season.
Is it?
At least in D.C. I've got 4 other friends doing that, and I just was checking in with them. I just feel like that. I still feel like that was the video of the year, the Miracles video, and it's easy to do. And for some reason, I've been a zombie something or other for the last 3 Halloweens. I was a zombie Tea Party protester, a zombie stockbroker, and something else that I'm forgetting right now. I'm just tired of political costumes. What about you?
I'm never tired of political costumes.
Okay.
I was thinking about wearing a ski mask and a GOP elephant T-shirt and carrying a gun and being a Republican House takeover. But I think I might just go with a Fidel Castro costume because a friend of mine is going as Che Guevara, and my Korean friend May, we're trying to convince him to go as Kim Jong-il, and we're just going to be a bunch of dictators. But the twist is that when people ask me who I'm going as, I'm going to say, Barack Obama.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Although I remember Castro is a tough one. Well, Castro is one of those really identifiable ones too, because in 2007, I was inspired by the MoveOn.org ad. I was General Betrayas, where I was basically like a villainous version of General Petraeus with the army fatigues and a kind of vaudeville villain like mustache and like knife and stuff like that, and theater makeup. The kind of like guy who comes in and like demands the rent, sort of. And people all thought I was Castro. They're like, "Oh, army uniform plus facial hair, Castro." So
the cigar. It's the cigar and the fatigues and the beard. So it's doable. But anyway, are you going to cover the rally?
We've got another guy at Slate covering it. I'm going to go anyway, and story will probably come up out of it. I will be at it. I can just foresee it being super boring because you could tell there were a lot of the reporting on the Glenn Beck rally. It was really like people went to a NASCAR rally expecting a car to blow up, and it didn't. They were like, "Oh, he's talking about America." He didn't say anything about Islam, about Obama's birth certificate. So I can totally imagine people going expecting a freak out, just a bunch of syrupy patriotism. So I'll see it anyway. So
all right, well, I look forward to reading about it.
Oh yeah, well, I'll at least have some items up on Slate about it, if not a full Superman Goes to the Supermarket essay.
And so we're both on the same page, 60-ish in the House, 7 or 8 in the Senate, and we'll see you on the other side of Tuesday.
All right, see you, man. Thanks.
All right.